Captain Lee Do-hyun checked his rifle for the third time that morning. The weapon felt solid in his hands, unlike everything else on this alien planet. 3 years had passed since Earth joined the Galactic Empire, and he still could not get used to the strange technology around him. The training ground on Nexus Prime stretched out before him like something from a dream. Purple grass covered the hills and 2 suns hung in the orange sky. Floating platforms moved through the air without making any sound. Everything here was powered by energy he did not understand. "Squad, form up," Do-hyun called to his team. 8 human soldiers gathered around him. They wore standard combat gear that looked ancient compared to what the other species carried. Their weapons shot bullets while the aliens used beams of light and energy. Staff Sergeant Kang Hyeri jogged over with her communication equipment. "Sir, the exercise starts in 10 minutes. We are assigned to capture the central tower against the Quellian Ethereal Guard." Do-hyun nodded. The Quellians were tall, thin beings with large heads and silver skin. They could read minds and move objects without touching them. Today, his human squad would fight against 12 of their best warriors. "Remember the plan," Do-hyun told his soldiers. "Use smoke to block their sight. Move fast and stay low. They cannot read our minds if they cannot see us clearly." Private First Class Yoon Tae-hyung raised his hand. "Sir, what if their mind powers work through the smoke?" "Then we adapt," Do-hyun replied. "We always adapt," the buzzer sounded. The exercise had begun. Do-hyun led his squad toward the tower through a valley filled with metal trees. These were not real trees, but training obstacles that could change shape during battle. The Quellians waited somewhere ahead, probably already knowing the humans were coming. Sergeant Cho Min-woo carried the heavy weapons and explosives. He was a big man who used to build bridges before joining the army. Now he destroyed things instead of building them. "Sir, I can place charges on the tower supports," he whispered. "Not yet," Do-hyun said. "We need to see what they do first." A blue energy blast hit the ground near his feet. The Quellians had found them. Do-hyun saw 3 silver figures standing on a hill, their hands glowing with psychic power. They did not carry weapons because their minds were weapons. "Smoke grenades now," Do-hyun shouted. Yoon Tae-hyung threw 2 grenades that burst into thick white clouds. The blue energy blasts stopped coming. Corporal Han So-young, their sniper, moved to higher ground while the others advanced through the smoke. "Primitive tactics," came a voice in perfect English. It was Veltara, the Quellian commander. She stood on a rock above them, her large black eyes looking down with amusement. "Do you really think simple smoke will stop us?" The smoke around Do-hyun began to spin and move away. Veltara was using her mind to control it. Soon the humans would be exposed again. Do-hyun made a quick decision. Hyeri noise barrage. Min-woo charges on the left flank. So-young covering fire. His team moved like they had trained together for years. Hyeri activated a device that made loud, harsh sounds. The Quellians covered their sensitive ears. Min-woo ran toward the tower with his explosives while So-young fired at the aliens to keep them busy. For a moment, it looked like the plan might work. Then Veltara raised her hand and all the human weapons stopped working. The bullets froze in the air. The explosive charges would not detonate. Even their communication devices went silent. "Your weapons are so simple," Veltara said with a laugh. "Metal and chemicals. Easy to control with the mind." The other alien commanders had gathered to watch. General Krex of the Draknari pointed at the humans with one of his 4 arms. His red scales reflected the purple sunlight. "See how they struggle without their primitive tools." Commander Thys of the Zenthari simply shook her head. Her people could move between dimensions, appearing and disappearing at will. Earth's military is an embarrassment to the Empire. Do-hyun felt anger rise in his chest, but he pushed it down. Anger made soldiers stupid, and stupid soldiers died. He looked at his frozen team and the aliens laughing at them. There had to be another way. "Squad, drop weapons and go hand to hand," he ordered. His soldiers looked confused but obeyed. They let their useless guns fall and pulled out knives and fighting sticks. The Quellians stopped laughing. They were not used to enemies who fought with their hands. Do-hyun ran straight at Veltara. She tried to stop him with her mind, but he was moving too fast and thinking too little for her to get a good grip on his thoughts. He tackled her to the ground before she could react. For 30 seconds, his squad fought the Quellians with fists and knives. They actually managed to surprise the psychic warriors. But then the other alien teams joined the fight. Energy beams cut through the air. Zenthari warriors appeared behind the humans and struck them down. The exercise ended with all 8 humans on the ground, stunned by alien weapons but not seriously hurt. The training systems were designed to stop short of real damage. Veltara stood up and brushed dirt from her silver skin. "Brave but foolish," she said. "Your species thinks with muscles instead of minds." General Krex laughed, a sound like grinding metal. No wonder Earth was conquered so easily. "You fight like animals." Doyun helped his soldiers to their feet. None of them were seriously injured, but their pride hurt more than their bodies. Around them, the alien commanders talked and pointed like they were looking at exhibits in a zoo. "Assign them to peacekeeping duties," Commander Thys suggested. "Keep them away from real combat where they might get in the way." Admiral Kim Nara watched from the observation deck high above. She was Earth's representative to the Galactic Empire, a job that seemed to involve losing arguments every day. Her face showed no expression as she listened to the aliens dismiss her species. General Park Ji-won stood beside her. He commanded all of Earth's special operations forces, 50,000 of the best soldiers humanity could produce. "They do not understand us," he said quietly. "No," Admiral Kim replied. "They do not. And maybe that is good." Do-hyun gathered his equipment and led his squad back to their transport. The other soldiers were quiet, thinking about their defeat. But Do-hyun was thinking about something else. The aliens had powerful abilities, but they all relied on those abilities too much. They expected enemies to fight the same way they did. What would happen if an enemy came along that could not be defeated by psychic powers or energy weapons? What would happen if the Empire faced something that was immune to all their advanced technology? He looked up at the orange sky and wondered if they would ever find out. The transport lifted off, carrying the human soldiers back to their base. Behind them, the alien commanders continued their exercises with weapons of light and mind. They were the best warriors in the galaxy, masters of technologies beyond human understanding. But Captain Lee Do-hyun had learned something important that day. The best warriors could still be surprised by someone who refused to play by their rules. 6 months had passed since the training exercise on Nexus Prime. Captain Lee Do-hyun now spent his days on patrol duty around small trading stations in the Outer Rim. It was boring work, but it kept Earth soldiers away from important battles where they might embarrass the Empire. Do-hyun was checking supply reports when Sergeant Kang Hyeri burst into his office. Her face was pale and her hands shook as she held a datapad. "Sir, you need to see this," she said. "Something big is happening." The datapad showed readings from deep space sensors. Massive objects were moving in the void between galaxies, heading toward Empire space. The objects were huge, bigger than entire fleets, but they did not match any known ship designs. "How many?" Do-hyun asked. "Hundreds, sir. Maybe thousands. And they are all moving together like they have one mind." Do-hyun studied the sensor data. The objects looked strange, with surfaces that seemed to move and change. They were not made of metal or energy like normal ships. They looked almost alive. "Get me a link to Admiral Kim," he ordered. The communication took several minutes to connect. When Admiral Kim's face appeared on the screen, she looked tired and worried. The past months had been hard on Earth's representatives in the Empire. "Captain Do-hyun, what can I do for you?" "Admiral, have you seen the deep space sensor reports?" "There is something big coming," Kim nodded. "The Empire's High Command called an emergency meeting this morning. They are sending the diplomatic ship Harmony's Light to make first contact." "That sounds like a good idea," Do-hyun said. "The crew has the best telepaths in the Empire." "Had," Kim corrected. "The ship went silent 20 minutes ago." Do-hyun felt cold fear in his stomach. The Harmony's Light carried 300 of the galaxy's most skilled mind readers and peacemakers. If something had happened to them, it was very bad news. "Sir," Hyeri interrupted. "New report coming in. They found the diplomatic ship." The image on Do-hyun's screen changed to show a rescue vessel approaching the Harmony's Light. The diplomatic ship looked normal from the outside, floating peacefully in space with all its lights still working. "Harmony's Light, this is rescue ship Swift Current. Please respond," came the voice of the rescue captain. Silence. "We are boarding now," the captain announced. The rescue team's cameras showed them moving through the ship's corridors. Everything looked normal. The lights worked, the air was clean, and there were no signs of battle or damage. But the ship was completely quiet. They found the crew in the main diplomatic chamber. All 300 beings sat in their chairs, staring at nothing. Their eyes were open, but they did not move or respond to anything. The ship's doctor ran medical scans and found that their bodies were healthy, but their minds were gone. "Completely empty. What could do this?" Hyeri whispered. Before Do-hyun could answer, new alarms began sounding. The unknown fleet had reached the outer colonies. The first attack came at mining station Theta 7. The station commander sent a brief message before all communication stopped. Strange ships approaching. They do not respond to signals. They look like they are made of meat and bone instead of metal. We are trying to evacuate, but the ships are too fast and... The message ended. 3 hours later, rescue ships reached Theta 7. They found the mining station intact, but empty. 2,000 colonists had simply vanished. Security cameras showed the strange organic ships landing, and creatures emerging that looked like a mix of machine and living tissue. The creatures had touched the colonists, and the colonists had immediately stopped moving, their faces becoming blank and empty. Then the creatures had led the colonists into their ships and flown away. They are taking people, Admiral Kim told the emergency council meeting. Not killing them, but stealing their minds somehow. Supreme Commander Zeth Cole of the Draknari slammed his clawed hand on the table. Send the war fleets. Destroy these invaders before they reach the core worlds. What if they are refugees? Asked Council Leader Oryx of the Quellians. What if they are running from something worse and just need help? Did refugees steal the minds of 300 diplomats? Zeth Cole growled. Admiral Kim raised her hand. Supreme Commander, I request permission to deploy Earth's Special Operations Forces to investigate these creatures. Human minds might be more resistant to whatever weapon they are using. The council chamber erupted in laughter. Commander Thys of the Xanthari wiped tears from her eyes. Send the primitives to fight unknown superweapons? That is your solution? Earth soldiers could not defeat training simulations, said General Velterra. How could they face real enemies? Because we think differently, Admiral Kim said firmly. Because we do not rely on psychic powers or energy weapons. Because sometimes being simple is an advantage, Zeth Cole waved his hand dismissively. We will handle this with proper military forces. Keep your humans away from the battle zones where they might interfere. Admiral Kim sat down, her face red with anger. Around her, the alien commanders began planning their response. They would send their best warriors, their most advanced ships, their most powerful weapons. 2 days later, the Empire's greatest battle fleet engaged the unknown invaders at Kepler Station. The fleet included 50 capital ships, 1,000 fighter craft, and elite units from every major species. The Ethereal Guard brought their most powerful psychic warriors. The Xanthari Phase Walkers prepared to attack from multiple dimensions. The Draknari Plasma Hunters charged their energy weapons to maximum power. The battle lasted 6 hours. At the end, only 3 ships escaped to tell what happened. Captain Vextar of the Quellian fleet sent the final message. They are immune to everything. Energy weapons pass through them like they are not there. Psychic attacks are absorbed and sent back stronger. The Phase Walkers tried to attack from other dimensions, but the creatures followed them there somehow. They are not just immune to our weapons, they use our own powers against us. His voice broke as he continued. They touched Commander Thys, and she turned on her own soldiers. They corrupted General Crixnell, and he began attacking his own fleet with psychic blasts. Whatever these things are, they do not just steal minds. They turn our greatest strengths into weaknesses. The transmission ended with the sound of Vextar screaming. Supreme Commander Zeth Cole stared at the empty communication screen. Around him, the High Command sat in stunned silence. Their best forces had been destroyed by an enemy they did not understand, using weapons they could not fight. How many ships did we lose? He asked quietly. All of them, sir, replied his aide. The 3 that escaped are badly damaged and will not fight again soon. And the creatures? Still advancing toward the core worlds. They seem to be getting stronger with each victory. Zeth Cole looked around the table at his commanders. These were the finest military minds in the galaxy. Beings who had conquered 1,000 worlds and defeated every enemy they had ever faced. Now they sat like frightened children, unsure of what to do. Options, he demanded. We could evacuate. The core worlds suggested one. General. We could try to negotiate, offered. Another. We could send unmanned. Ships with nuclear weapons, said a third. All the suggestions sounded desperate and unlikely to work. The enemy had proven immune to every weapon they possessed and could turn their own abilities against them. Finally, General Velterra spoke. There is one option we have not considered. What? She looked uncomfortable, like the words hurt to say. We could ask the humans for help. The chamber fell silent. The idea was almost unthinkable. Earth's forces were considered the weakest in the Empire, barely qualified to guard empty space stations. But they were also the only military force that did not rely on psychic powers or energy weapons. Zethkol closed his eyes and thought about his options. He could continue sending traditional forces to their destruction, or he could try something desperate. "Get me Admiral Kim," he said finally. When Kim appeared on the communication screen, Zethkol forced himself to speak the words he never thought he would say. "Send your soldiers. All of them." Admiral Kim's face showed no expression, but Do-hyun knew she must be feeling satisfied. "How many do you need?" "All of them," Zethkol repeated. "Every human soldier you have. This enemy requires a different approach." "We will mobilize immediately," Kim replied. "But I want something in return." "Name it." "Full battlefield command for General Park Ji-won. No interference from the High Command. Let us fight this war our way." Zethkol hesitated. Giving battle command to a human was almost as unthinkable as asking for their help in the first place. But his traditional commanders had failed completely. "Agreed," he said. As the communication ended, Do-hyun received new orders. Every human special operations soldier in the Empire was to report for immediate deployment. They were finally going to war, not as support troops or peacekeepers, but as the Empire's last hope. He looked at his rifle and smiled grimly. Maybe the aliens would stop laughing now. The cargo ship Iron Mountain was never meant to carry soldiers. Built to transport mining equipment and raw materials, it had been hastily converted to move 50,000 human troops across the galaxy. The sleeping quarters were cramped, the food was terrible, and the artificial gravity failed twice a day. Captain Lee Do-hyun did not care about the discomfort. For the first time in 3 years, he felt like a real soldier again instead of a galactic joke. "Sir, General Park wants to see you in the briefing room," said Corporal Han So-young. She had to shout over the noise of the ship's struggling engines. Do-hyun made his way through corridors packed with human soldiers. They came from every nation on Earth, but they all wore the same determined expression. Word had spread quickly about what happened to the Empire's elite forces. The humans knew they were not being sent as backup. They were the main attack force now. The briefing room was actually the ship's old cargo bay with chairs bolted to the floor. General Park Ji-won stood at the front, pointing at holographic displays showing the enemy fleet. He was a small man with gray hair, but his voice could fill any room. "Gentlemen, ladies, we have a problem," Park began. "The enemy, intelligence calls them devourers, are immune to every weapon the Empire has tried. Energy beams, psychic attacks, dimensional warfare, nothing works." He changed the display to show recordings from the battle at Kepler Station. The human soldiers watched in silence as alien ships fired uselessly at the organic-looking enemy vessels. The Devourer craft seemed to absorb the energy attacks and grow stronger. "However," Park continued, "we have advantages the Empire forces did not have. First, we do not use psychic powers, so the Devourers cannot turn our minds against us. Second, our weapons are kinetic. Bullets, explosives, chemical reactions. The enemy has not faced these before." Staff Sergeant Kang Hyeri raised her hand. "Sir, what if kinetic weapons do not work either?" "Then we try something else," Park replied. "Adaptation is humanity's greatest strength. While other species perfect one type of warfare, we master many types." Do-hyun studied the enemy ship recordings. The vessels looked less like machines and more like living creatures. Their hulls seemed to breathe and pulse. "General, do we know what these things actually are?" "Intelligence believes they are organic ships controlled by parasitic entities. The original builders were probably conquered and infected, then turned into servants. That explains why psychic attacks fail. You cannot read the mind of a parasite that has eaten the original consciousness." The implications hit Do-hyun immediately. So every being they capture becomes another enemy soldier. Exactly. And they have been capturing beings for months now. Their army grows with every victory while ours shrinks. Park changed the display again, this time showing the human battle plan. It was unlike anything the Empire had tried. Instead of large fleet actions, the humans would use small teams to infiltrate enemy ships. Instead of matching the enemy's strengths, they would attack weaknesses. "We will board their vessels using breaching pods," Park explained. "Once inside, teams will plant explosive charges and chemical weapons. The goal is not to capture their ships, but to destroy them completely." "What about the captured beings?" asked Sergeant Cho Minwoo. "Can we save them?" Park's expression grew sad. Intelligence says no. The parasite infection appears to be permanent. The kindest thing we can do is make their death quick. The room fell silent. Every human soldier understood what that meant. They would be killing beings who had once been innocent colonists and diplomats, but those beings were already dead in every way that mattered. Deployment begins in 6 hours, Park announced. Get some rest if you can. As the soldiers filed out, Do-hyun remained behind. Park noticed him waiting and walked over. Something on your mind, Captain? Sir, what if we fail? What if our weapons do not work either? Park smiled grimly. Then we improvise. Humans have been fighting impossible battles for thousands of years. We survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and disasters that should have destroyed us. We did not survive by being the strongest or the smartest. And how did we survive? By refusing to give up. By trying new things when old things failed. By being too stubborn to die quietly. Do-hyun returned to his squad's quarters. His remaining soldiers were checking their equipment one final time. After the losses at the training exercise, his team had been filled with replacements. Private First Class Yoon Tae-hyung was still his medic, but he had new faces around him. Listen up, Do-hyun told them. In a few hours, we board enemy ships filled with creatures that can steal minds and turn people into weapons. Our bullets might not work. Our explosives might fail. We might all die horribly. The new soldiers looked nervous, but Yoon Tae-hyung grinned. Sounds like a normal Tuesday, sir. The difference is that this time we are not fighting for the Empire or for glory, Do-hyun continued. We are fighting because everyone else failed, and if we fail too, billions of innocent beings will die. No pressure. Sergeant Cho Min-woo, who had survived the training exercise, nodded. Sir, what are our rules of engagement? Simple. If it moves and it is not human, kill it. If it does not move but looks suspicious, kill it anyway. If you are not sure, ask me and I will probably tell you to kill it. What about prisoners? There are no prisoners. The parasites cannot be negotiated with or cured. This is extermination, pure and simple. The ship shuddered as it dropped out of faster-than-light travel. Through the small windows they could see the Xerian system ahead. It had once been a beautiful star system with 7 inhabited planets. Now it was a battleground where the Empire would make its last stand before the Devourers, reach the core worlds. All troops to boarding stations, came the announcement over the ship's communication system. Do-hyun led his squad to the breaching pods. These were small, heavily armored vehicles designed to punch through enemy hulls and deliver soldiers directly into hostile ships. The Empire had never used them before because their energy weapons could cut through any armor. But the Empire had also never faced enemies that absorbed energy weapons. Remember the plan, Do-hyun told his squad as they climbed into their pod. We breach the hull, move fast to the power center, plant charges, and get out. Estimated time inside the enemy ship is 8 minutes. What if we cannot get out? Asked Private Kim Ji-soo, one of the new soldiers. Then we detonate the charges anyway and make sure the ship goes down with us. The breaching pod was cramped and noisy. 8 soldiers in full combat gear barely fit inside. Through the small front window, Do-hyun could see the Devourer fleet ahead. The enemy ships were even stranger up close, with surfaces that rippled like living skin. Launching in 30 seconds, announced the pod pilot. Do-hyun checked his rifle one last time. The bullets were made of dense metal designed to punch through armor. His squad carried thermite grenades that burned hot enough to melt steel, chemical weapons that attacked living tissue, and enough explosives to level a city block. 10 seconds to launch. Around them, hundreds of other breaching pods prepared to fire from the human fleet. It was the largest coordinated infantry assault in galactic history, 50,000 soldiers attacking simultaneously. Launch! The pod shot forward like a bullet. Through the window, Do-hyun watched the enemy ship grow larger and larger. The Devourer vessel did not try to shoot them down. It probably could not understand what the small objects were. Impact in 5 seconds, the pilot announced. Brace for... The pod hit the enemy hull and punched through like a drill through soft wood. Instantly, alarms began sounding inside the alien ship. Emergency lights flashed and strange liquid dripped from damaged pipes. Do-hyun was the first out of the pod, his rifle ready. The interior of the ship looked like the inside of a living creature. The walls were covered with what looked like veins and organs. The air smelled of decay and something worse. Move, 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 he shouted. His squad ran through corridors that seemed to pulse with their own heartbeat. Strange creatures skittered away from their lights, parasites the size of rats that had not yet found host bodies. They reached the first junction and met their first real enemy. The creature had once been a Quellian diplomat, but now its silver skin was covered with black growths, and its large eyes were completely white. It moved in jerky, unnatural ways like a puppet being controlled by someone else. "Contact front," Yoon Tae-hyung shouted. Do-hyun fired 3 shots center mass. The bullets tore through the creature's chest and it fell backward. Black fluid poured from the wounds instead of blood. "It works," he said with satisfaction. Kinetic weapons work. More infected beings appeared ahead of them. Draknari, Zenthari, humans from the captured colonies. All of them moved with the same jerky motion. All of them had the same white eyes. Do-hyun's squad opened fire. Their bullets cut down the infected beings efficiently. Whatever controlled them had not expected physical projectiles that could not be absorbed or redirected. "Power center should be ahead," called Minwoo, consulting his scanner. They fought their way deeper into the ship, leaving bodies behind them. The parasites had turned their hosts into weapons, but they were still limited by the physical capabilities of the infected bodies. A human with a rifle was still deadlier than an infected alien with claws. The power center was a massive chamber filled with pulsing organic machinery. Captain Lee Do-hyun ran straight into the crowd of infected beings, his rifle firing continuously. The creatures turned toward him like plants following sunlight, drawn away from their positions guarding the central organism. Behind him, his team moved toward their target while the enemies focused on the immediate threat. Sergeant Cho Minwoo placed his last explosive charges on the chamber walls. Each blast brought down chunks of the living ceiling, crushing infected beings beneath tons of organic matter. But more creatures kept coming from deeper parts of the ship. "Yoon, how long do you need?" shouted Corporal Han So-young as she provided covering fire. 30 seconds to reach the injection point, the medic called back, running toward the central organism with Private Kim Jisoo beside him. Do-hyun emptied his rifle into a group of modified Draknari, creatures that had been changed to have armor-like skin and multiple sets of claws. His bullets punched through their defenses, but there were always more behind them. "Sir, reloading," called Jisoo as she fired her last magazine. "Do not worry about ammunition," Do-hyun replied, drawing his combat knife. "We just need to buy time." The infected beings swarmed over him. Claws tore at his armor while teeth tried to find exposed skin. But Do-hyun had trained for close combat his entire career. He moved like a dancer, cutting and stabbing while avoiding the worst attacks. Nearby, Yoon reached the central organism. The creature that controlled the entire ship was massive, with tentacles connecting it to every system in the vessel. It seemed to notice the approaching human and tried to defend itself, but its host body was too integrated into the ship's systems to move effectively. "Biological weapon deployed," Yoon announced as he injected the bacteria into one of the main arterial connections. The effect was immediate. The bacteria spread through the ship's circulatory system like wildfire. Within seconds, the infected beings around them began convulsing as the parasites controlling them died. The creatures fell to the ground, their host bodies finally free but too damaged to survive. The ship itself began dying. The walls pulsed irregularly as the biological weapon attacked the parasites that kept the organism alive. Fluids leaked from damaged arteries and the air became thick with the smell of decay. "We need to leave now," Do-hyun said, helping Yoon to his feet. "This whole ship is going to collapse." But their exit route was blocked by falling debris and dying creatures. The ship's death throes were bringing down entire sections of the internal structure. "This way," called So-young, pointing to a tear in the wall that led to another arterial passage. They climbed through the gap, just as the central chamber collapsed completely. The passage they entered was filled with fluid that came up to their knees, making movement slow and difficult. "Sir, the breaching pod is this direction," Minwoo said, consulting his navigation device. They waded through the dying ship's corridors as everything around them fell apart. The walls leaked, the ceiling sagged, and strange lights flickered as the ship's nervous system failed. Finally, they reached their entry point. The breaching pod waited where they had left it, its engines still running. But the hull breach around it was closing as the ship's body tried to heal itself. "Move, move, move," Do-hyun shouted. They dove through the closing gap just as the ship's hull sealed behind them. The pod shot away from the dying command vessel, accelerating toward the safety of the human fleet. Through the pod's window, they watched the massive command ship tear itself apart. Without the parasites to coordinate its functions, the organism could not maintain its structure. Pieces broke away and drifted into space like a mountain falling apart. Command ship destroyed, the pilot reported. All enemy vessels in the area have stopped moving. Across the battlefield, the Devourer fleet was dying. Without coordination from the Central Intelligence, the individual ships could not function. Some tried to flee, but their organic engines failed. Others simply drifted in space as their crews died. The few Empire ships that had survived the distraction attack moved in to finish off the remaining enemies. For the first time since the invasion began, the Empire was winning. Mission accomplished, Do-hyun said quietly. But the cost had been enormous. Of the 50,000 human soldiers who began the battle, less than 30,000 survived. The Empire's losses were even worse. Entire fleets had been destroyed, and whole species had lost most of their military forces. 2 weeks later, Captain Lee Do-hyun stood in the Empire's Grand Assembly Hall on the capital world. The massive chamber could hold representatives from all 47 member species, though many seats were empty now. The war had taken a terrible toll on everyone. Supreme Commander Zethkol rose to address the assembly. The proud Draknari leader looked older and more tired than before the war. Today we gather to honor those who saved our civilization when all seemed lost. He turned toward the human delegation. For too long we dismissed Earth's military as primitive and weak. We laughed at their simple weapons and basic tactics. We were wrong. General Park Ji-won stood as Zethkol continued. General Park, your forces accomplished what our most advanced technology could not. You defeated an enemy that was immune to our greatest weapons. The Empire owes humanity a debt that cannot be repaid. Admiral Kim Nara rose from her seat. Supreme Commander, we do not seek payment. We seek respect and equality. You have both, Zethkol replied. Effective immediately, Earth becomes a full partner in the Empire's governing council. Your military doctrine will be studied by all species. Your tactical innovations will become standard throughout our forces. The assembly erupted in applause. Species that had once mocked humanity now stood to honor them. The transformation was complete. Earth had gone from laughingstock to savior in a matter of months. After the ceremony, Do-hyun walked through the capital city with his surviving squad members. The alien architecture was beautiful, all flowing curves and floating spires, but he found himself missing the simple, practical buildings of Earth. Sir, what happens now? Asked Private Kim Ji-soo. She had been promoted to sergeant after the final battle. Now we go home, Do-hyun replied. The war is over, but there is always another war coming. The Empire knows that now. Will they still think we are primitive? Asked Yoon Tae-hyung, who now wore the insignia of a lieutenant. Maybe, but they will also think we are dangerous. That is more important than being respected. Sergeant Cho Min-woo pointed to a news display showing human soldiers training alien troops in kinetic warfare tactics. Look at that. 6 months ago they laughed at our weapons. Now they want to learn how to use them. Do you think we changed the galaxy? Asked Corporal Han So-young. Do-hyun considered the question. The Empire would never be the same after the Devourer War. Species that had relied on psychic powers and energy weapons were now learning to fight with bullets and explosives. The military academies were teaching human tactics alongside traditional strategies. We did not change the galaxy, he said finally. We reminded it that there are many ways to solve problems. Sometimes the oldest way is the best way. A year later, Colonel Lee Do-hyun, he had been promoted twice, stood in the Empire's new war college on Earth. The building had been constructed in Seoul, making it the first major imperial facility built on humanity's homeworld. Students from dozens of species sat in his classroom, all eager to learn human military doctrine. They studied everything from ancient Earth battles to the tactics used against the Devourers. What had once been dismissed as primitive was now considered essential knowledge. Today we discuss adaptation in warfare, Do-hyun told his students. Other species perfect one type of combat and use it for thousands of years. Humans master many types and change them constantly. A young Quellian student raised her hand. Professor, why do humans change their tactics so often? Because our enemies change, Do-hyun replied. What works against one foe fails against another. The species that survives is not the strongest or smartest. It is the one that adapts fastest. After class, he walked to the memorial wall, where the names of fallen soldiers were carved in stone. Sergeant Cho Min-woo's name was there, along with 20,000 others who had died fighting the Devourers. They still think we are crazy, said a familiar voice behind him. Do-hyun turned to see Admiral Kim Nara, now promoted to Fleet Admiral and commander of the Empire's joint forces. Who thinks we are crazy? Everyone. The aliens cannot understand how we fight wars with such primitive weapons and win. Maybe that is good, Do-hyun said. Let them think we are unpredictable. It keeps them honest. Kim nodded toward the memorial wall. Do you think they would be proud of what we built here? Do-hyun looked at the names of his fallen comrades, then at the alien students learning human tactics in the distance. The Empire had changed completely since the war. Humans served alongside aliens as equals, sharing knowledge and protecting the galaxy together. I think they would be satisfied, he said. We proved that being different is not being weak. Sometimes the galaxy needs soldiers who think with their hearts instead of their computers. And if another enemy comes, one that is immune to kinetic weapons too? Do-hyun smiled. Then we will try something else. We always try something else. As the sun set over Seoul, casting long shadows across the memorial, Do-hyun reflected on how much had changed. 3 years ago, humanity had been the Empire's greatest joke. The corridor filled with infected beings pressed against each other like animals in a cage. Captain Lee Do-hyun counted at least 50 enemies between his squad and escape, with more arriving every second. Behind them, the thermite charges would detonate in less than 3 minutes. Sir, we cannot fight through all of them, said Private Kim Ji-soo, her voice tight with fear. Do-hyun studied the approaching creatures. They moved differently than normal soldiers. No tactics, no coordination, just a mindless drive to reach the intruders. The parasites controlling them were smart enough to use their host bodies as weapons, but not smart enough to use proper military strategy. Yoon, do you still have those chemical smoke grenades? Do-hyun asked. Yes, sir, but I thought they were for marking extraction points. New plan. The smoke contains industrial solvents, right? Stuff that eats through metal and plastic? Yoon's eyes lit up with understanding. And probably through organic tissue too. Everyone chemical protection masks on. Yoon, fill this corridor with every chemical weapon we have. The medic pulled out grenades filled with industrial cleaning compounds, rust removers, and medical sterilizers. Nothing designed as a weapon but all deadly to living tissue. He threw them into the crowd of infected beings. The effect was immediate and horrible. The creatures began dissolving where the chemicals touched them. Their host bodies had no immunity to compounds designed to break down organic matter. Black fluid poured from their wounds as the parasites inside them died. Move, Do-hyun shouted. His squad ran through the corridor, stepping over the remains of infected beings. The chemicals had cleared a path, but more enemies were coming from side passages. They had 2 minutes until the charges exploded. Sergeant Cho Min-woo turned to face a group of infected Draknari, blocking their escape route. These were larger and stronger than the other creatures, with 4 arms ending in natural claws. But when Min-woo opened fire with his machine gun, the heavy bullets tore through them just as easily as the smaller enemies. 30 seconds to extraction point, called Corporal Han So-young from ahead. They reached the hull breach where their pod waited. The pilot had the engines running and ready for immediate departure. But as they climbed aboard, Do-hyun noticed something that made his blood run cold. Through the ship's transparent sections, he could see other human breaching pods. Most were empty, their crews already extracted or dead, but several pods were surrounded by infected beings trying to break inside. Pilot, can you pick up survivors from other pods? Negative, sir. We have 30 seconds before this ship explodes. We need to leave now. Do-hyun watched helplessly as infected creatures swarmed over one of the trapped pods. Inside, he could see human soldiers fighting desperately against enemies trying to break through their armor. The charges detonated. The Devourer ship tore itself apart from the inside. Sections of hull flew in all directions as the organic machinery failed and died. The trapped human pods were destroyed instantly, their crews dying with the ship they had successfully sabotaged. 1 enemy vessel destroyed. The pilot reported as they flew back to the human fleet. Estimated casualties among our forces, high. Do-hyun said nothing during the return flight. He had completed his mission, but watching other soldiers die without being able to help felt like failure. The cargo ship Iron Mountain had become a hospital ship. Medical teams worked frantically to treat wounded soldiers returning from the assault. Many had been injured by the infected beings' claws and teeth. Others suffered from exposure to the chemicals they had used as weapons. General Park Ji-won waited for the squad leaders in the briefing room. His face was grim as he reviewed the battle reports. "Results," he announced as the officers gathered. "We destroyed 18 enemy ships out of approximately 200. Human casualties are 30%. Mission status partial success." Captain Lee Do-hyun raised his hand. "Sir, what did we learn about the enemy?" "Several important things. First, kinetic weapons are effective against infected host bodies. Second, chemical weapons can kill the parasites directly. Third, the enemy has no tactical coordination. They fight like wild animals instead of soldiers." Park changed the display to show captured footage from inside the destroyed ships. "Most importantly, we confirmed that the ships themselves are alive. They are not vessels carrying parasites, they are giant organisms that have been infected and converted into weapons." "How does that help us?" asked another captain. "It means we can kill them like any other living creature. Disease, poison, biological weapons, things the Empire never tried because they only fight with energy and mind powers." Lieutenant Colonel Chang Woo-jin, Park's second-in-command, stood up. "Sir, intelligence has identified the enemy's command ship. It is approximately 10 times larger than the others, probably containing the central intelligence that coordinates all parasite activity." The display showed a massive organic structure that looked more like a floating mountain than a ship. Its surface was covered with smaller ships that seemed to grow directly from the main body, like fruit from a tree. "If we can destroy that command ship, the entire enemy fleet should lose coordination," Chang continued. "But it is heavily defended, and our remaining forces are not sufficient for a direct assault." Park looked around the room at his tired officers. "Recommendations?" "We need the Empire's help," suggested one captain. "Get them to provide a distraction while we attack the command ship." "The Empire's fleets are in full retreat," Park replied. "Most of their ships have been destroyed or damaged. We are essentially fighting alone now." Do-hyun studied the image of the command ship. It was enormous, probably containing millions of infected beings and thousands of parasites. A frontal assault would be suicide even for the full human force. "Sir, what if we do not attack it directly?" he said. "What if we get inside first and attack from within?" "Explain. The ship is organic, right? It probably has something like a circulatory system, digestive organs, maybe even a brain. If we can introduce the right biological agent into its system, we might be able to kill it from the inside." Park considered this. What kind of biological agent? Private First Class Yoon Tae-hyung, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. "Sir, I am trained as a medic and biochemist. If that thing is really alive, it needs nutrients and oxygen like any other organism. We could create a biological weapon that targets its metabolic processes." "How long would that take?" "Give me access to the ship's medical lab in 6 hours, sir." Park made his decision. "Do it. Chang, coordinate with the remaining Empire forces for a distraction assault. Make it look like we are attempting a direct attack on their outer ships. Do-hyun, select a small team for infiltration. We get one chance at this." As the officers dispersed to their tasks, Do-hyun pulled aside his surviving squad members. Sergeant Cho Min-woo, Corporal Han So-young, Private First Class Yoon Tae-hyung, and Private Kim Ji-soo. 5 soldiers against a ship the size of a city. "Volunteers only for this mission," he told them. "We are probably not coming back." "Where else would we go?" Min-woo replied with a grin. "The Empire thinks we are primitive. Earth is too far away. This is our war now." "What about you, Ji-soo?" Do-hyun asked the newest member of his team. "You did not sign up for suicide missions." The young private checked her rifle and smiled. "Sir, someone needs to make sure you old soldiers do not mess up the plan." 6 hours later, Yoon Tae-hyung emerged from the medical lab carrying a container of specially designed bacteria. "It targets the cellular structure of the parasite organisms," he explained. "Once introduced into the command ship system, it should spread throughout the entire structure within minutes." "Will it kill the host bodies too?" Do-hyun asked. "Probably. But sir, those beings were already dead. We are just giving them peace." The plan was simple in theory but deadly in practice. While the Empire's remaining ships attacked the outer edge of the Devourer fleet, Do-hyun's team would use a single breaching pod to penetrate the command ship. They would fight their way to what appeared to be the central nervous system and introduce Yoon's biological weapon, insertion. "Point has been identified," reported the pod pilot as they approached the massive enemy ship. "Looks like some kind of sensory organ near the ship's forward section." Through the window, Do-hyun could see the command ship's surface up close. It definitely looked alive, with veins pulsing beneath a skin-like covering. Smaller organisms crawled across its surface like parasites on a whale. Remember, we need to reach the central chamber within 20 minutes, Do-Yun reminded his team. Any longer and the ship's immune system will adapt to our presence. What does that mean exactly? Asked Jisoo. It means the ship will start growing new creatures specifically designed to kill us, Yoon replied cheerfully. The pod punched through the ship's hull into what looked like a vast circulatory system. Tubes the size of subway tunnels carried fluids in different colors throughout the ship's body. The air was thick and humid like being inside a lung. Follow the main artery toward the center, Do-Yun ordered as they began their final mission. Behind them, infected beings began emerging from side passages. But these were different from the ones they had fought before. These moved with purpose and coordination, and their host bodies had been modified with additional arms, enhanced speed, and natural weapons.